All right, Jason, thanks for speaking with me today. You bought two businesses in one deal back in August of 2024. That's TWS Energy Controls and WF Energy Controls across both Australia and New Zealand. But give me a bit of background before we get into the deal. How did you, or what made you decide on buying a business, and what brought you to that point in terms of your background?
Sure. So my background's in corporate finance and M&A. Started my career as a chartered accountant at PwC in Sydney, Australia. And worked, I guess, across a range of different deals across different industries that got me the basic understanding of, what good businesses look like and what deals look like. Following an advisory career, I then spent some years in both in-house corporate at Woolworths Group in Australia, as well as growing a scale-up business called Cashrewards in Australia as well. And after probably a 10-year career, I guess, of advising on deals, working on the corporate side, helping scale up a scale-up business, then wanted to do something a bit more entrepreneurial. Like many people, I'm not necessarily technically minded, with a super high risk tolerance, I guess, for a startup or tech startup type business. And started thinking about alternative routes, I guess, to entrepreneurship. Really started with looking at I guess new ideas in terms of what happens if I just buy the laundromat, the corner off my street. That really opened, I guess, a pretty deep rabbit hole, I guess, in terms of understanding the ETA world, and particularly the search fund world. And this was sort of, in and around just after COVID. And by then, there's a raft of materials, lots of podcasts, lots of learnings online, and dove kind of headfirst into it. And the whole search fund model really appealed to me as a training ground, really, to be a first-time CEO operator. That was the path I decided, was right for me. And from a career perspective and as well as a personal perspective, I had two young kids at the time, and thought, from an entrepreneurial perspective, if this was the time to do it, or if there was no time, if there's a better time to do it, this is it. And pulled the trigger.
Okay, cool. What was it about the search fund model that appealed to you? Because I mean, they're two kind of very different paths that are both quite popular. One being, laundromats and car washes and these kind of sort of more hands-off businesses. And then the search fund model is very different in the sense that you're kind of going after one big business, one big company, and really getting involved operationally. Why did you go down that path in the end?
Yeah, for me, the goal really is to set myself up for a long-term career as an operator. And a smaller business requires you to be, much more intimately involved on day-to-day operations almost straight away. And that comes with, higher risk as well. Whereas at the search fund level, you're generally targeting businesses that are more, I guess, on the larger size of the small business range, so sort of between 2 and 5 mil of EBITDA. And at that size, generally, if you pick the right business, you have a pretty strong, or you should have a decent enough management layer where it's not all resting on you on a day-to-day basis. And the search fund model as well, particularly, what's been the ethos that's been spread, I guess, across the universities in the US and in Europe, is that, you have investors who understand that this is a first-time operator, first-time CEO, and investors and advisors and the board that you surround yourself with, they live that ethos on a day-to-day basis in terms of supporting you as a first-time CEO. So for me, it's not a cheat code, but it's a really good way, I guess, to really train yourself up as a hopefully a career of being an operator and a CEO, and that really appealed to me.
Okay. How did the whole process start? I'm talking the runway before you even started searching for a business. Did you just start reaching out to these search funds and investors and say, hey, I'm Jason and I want to do a search and here's my background? Or how did that work before you started searching?
Yeah, so when I first came across the search fund model was probably 2021-ish, 2022. And at that point in time, the search fund community in Australia and New Zealand was probably in the, I don't know, 40 people kind of level.
Okay.
So at that stage, as you learn about it, it's quite easy to reach out to everyone involved in the local ecosystem. And that culminated actually in the first ETA forum on Manly Beach in I think it was 2022. So it was initially meeting other existing searchers, of which there were not many, or potential searchers or investors, just on Zoom calls mostly, or coffee calls or coffee meetups, and just let them know that, hey, I'm someone thinking about this. I'm someone that I think can do a good job at this, and start to develop that relationship. And so that was organic, right? And I still had my full-time job at that point in time. But it was only after, meeting a few, not getting commitments from investors or anything like that, but people would say, hey, you'd be a good candidate. I'd be interested in maybe backing you, which gave me the confidence to start the search.
Okay, awesome. And then, so you began the search. What did you look for? Was it very broad in terms of I'll buy anything, or did you niche down into specific industries? How did you go about making those decisions? And then tell me a bit about how the search actually worked once you started. How did those first few months look?
Yeah, no worries. Look, my criteria was pretty broad brush. So I was like in my banking days and advisory days and my corporate days, I was, kind of a generalist. I was pretty tech-minded, and so initially started looking at any industry where I think I can add that sort of technical bent. Particularly targeting, I guess, old world industries, whether it's services or manufacturing or industrials and that sort of thing, where I can add a technical angle to it. But as I started to dive deeper, I broadened my horizons a lot, and in that first year of search, I think I probably reached out to almost 4,000, 5,000 businesses, had 500 meetings or phone calls with business owners across all different industries, and put out 5 offers for 5 businesses in quite diverse industries, ranging from defense technology to managed service provider through to a seafood wholesaler. So you can see that it's quite a variety. We also looked all across Australia, New Zealand, and was geographically, I guess, pretty spread as well. So it's for me, a business is a business as long as they exhibit, I guess, those business characteristics that are attractive, recurring revenue, lack of real customer concentration, good margins, strong cash flow, etc.
And so those other conversations that you had, where did that business that you finally ended up buying fall into sort of having those conversations? Was it earlier on in the process and it just took time for that deal to materialize as you were having these other conversations? Or was it sort of one by one you were making these offers and then going back to your search? How did that look, and how were the conversations going with the seller of the business that you ultimately ended up buying?
Yeah. So we searched for a full year before actually finding the business that I ended up acquiring. And, through that time, it was a volume game, really. It was having, multiple calls with different owners every day at the same time as you're running diligence on certain deals, putting out offers. So, it's pretty full on. We tried everything from, cold email outreach through to, visiting business owners in trade shows and, trying to learn about industries and trade shows, networking with advisors and brokers and that sort of thing. So, it's a bit of a volume game because the deal can come from anywhere. And so, people often question with the search whether, a proprietary method or brokered method, what's better. In my opinion, you got to do all of it. And if not for anything, but just for practice, because then, when that gem of a deal does turn up, then you're ready to act whatever the route it came from. We did all of that, a lot of calls, a lot of trade shows, all that sort of stuff, but ended up finding my business on Seek Business, which is just a online listing here in Australia. It was, I remember, 2nd of January. No one else was looking. I guess during the summer holidays, just straight after New Year's. But we had a software deal die on us on Christmas Eve. So I was getting over heartbreak and was active on Seek Business on the 2nd of January and spotted that one there. So you could say that all that hard work and networking and physically visiting business owners and all that stuff was a bit of a waste of time. But in my opinion, it sort of built up the experience and kind of allowed me to practice hunting and locking in a deal, so that when we did find the right one, albeit through seek business, we were ready to act.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little bit like buying a house. You only know that you've found the right one after viewing 50 others. So it's not necessarily a waste of time that you spent
Totally.
on the others. And those 5 offers that you made that didn't go through, why didn't they go through? Obviously, various reasons, but I'd love to understand why it doesn't work out sometimes.
Yeah, so all or 4 out of the 5, the one that we didn't, the one that excluding the one that we acquired, they were all brokered processes through pretty large brokerage practices or mid-tier accounting firms, and so the competition was pretty high. So all 4 of those we were beaten either by private equity or strategics, and on 3 out of the 4 by a pretty large margin to a
Okay.
price that didn't make sense for us. So, again, when you compare pros and cons of brokers, using brokers or intermediaries versus, I guess, a direct proprietary outreach, yeah, there's benefits to the latter.
Okay, cool. And so tell me about the business that you ended up settling on, TWS and
Yep.
WF Energy Controls. What do they do?
Yeah, so TWS and WF Energy Controls, they're 2 entities, one in Christchurch, New Zealand, one in Sydney, Australia. We acquired them from the same vendor, and we are manufacturers of instrument transformers, particularly low to medium voltage. So instrument transformers are basically measurement transformers. So anytime anytime a substation or a power plant or a manufacturing plant or a substation plugs into the electrical grid at the low to medium voltage level, you need to make sure and measure voltages and currents accurately. And you do that because they need to be, 1, safe, so for protection purposes, and 2, they have to be at the right levels for metering purposes to charge customers. So transformers basically allows the accurate measurement of them. So we manufacture transformers, and we are one of the few in Australia and New Zealand that manufacture these transformers end to end, meaning raw material, electrical steel, copper, resin, etc., through to the manufacturing process and then through to testing and calibration. So you can't just plug in any product into the grid. They have to be they have to abide, I guess, by local electrical standards. We have in-house and accredited testing laboratories to make sure every product goes out is highly accurate. The businesses we sell to all the major utilities and network providers and DNSPs in Australia and New Zealand, as well as metering companies and switchboard providers. So quite, blue chip type customers. And both businesses have been around for many decades. So a lot of the customers we've been servicing for a long time.
Okay. And some high-level figures in terms of revenue and profitability. Can you give us an idea as to how big this business is?
Yeah, so at the time of acquisition, we were doing about 10 million in terms of revenue and about just under 3 million of EBITDA. So quite,
And what
I guess smack bang in the traditional search criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. And good margins for manufacturing as well, because I think manufacturing generally is, I mean, it's a broad range, but heavy on
Yep.
the tiny or the thin margins. Great. And what was it that excited you about this business? I mean, when you saw it, why were you like, okay, this is the one, let's go and make an offer on this?
Yeah, so all of those, attractive characteristics that I talked about before in terms of, highly recurring or repeat revenue, a very strong customer base with no customer concentration, really good margins and cash flow. And the business did have quite a solid layer of middle management that, ran the business on a day-to-day basis. But that's not completely reliant on the owner of the business. But I think most importantly was just the industry tailwinds and dynamics and where the product sits in the value chain. As long as you need more electricity, you're going to need to measure it accurately. So it doesn't really matter what happens in terms of, the generation trends of the energy transition nor at the distribution level, whether it's EV charging or data centers or whatever it is. As long as you need more electricity, you're going to need more of this product. And so because the business is one of few that actually manufactures this stuff locally, there's also that whole trend around, local resiliency, I guess, in local manufacturing, local supply chains, particularly supporting a critical industry. And this was all, again, before the whole AI boom of the last couple of years, which has only, I guess, put fuel to the fire in terms of the tailwinds. So look, it was a sector that we were, we could see, a long period of growth ahead. A lot of other sectors, you think about growth, you think, kind of 3 to 5 year kind of trends, whereas this one we're seeing, a lot of investment, particularly into the grid for the next, hopefully, 20, 30, 40 years.
Okay. And the seller, was this a classic case of retiring and wanting to get out of the business, or what was his story, and how did the conversations go with him?
Yeah, so he was actually a farmer from Wanaka in the South Island of New Zealand.
Okay.
So, he's an entrepreneur in the sense of, he bought a few different businesses over the years, and the farming being his major operation. And yes, he was heading to retirement. Had his first grandchild on the way, and had a little portfolio, I guess, of 6 or 7 different businesses, and decided to shed them all before his grandchild came to the world. And yeah, look, the negotiations went, I think, relatively smoothly. Being someone who had done, being the seller who has done deals and sold businesses and bought businesses before, meant that this was not the first rodeo for him. And he had, I guess, reasonable expectations in terms of pricing and structure and, legal terms and that sort of thing. So I think overall the deal process went quite well. There is, complexities, I guess, of doing a cross-border deal, right? 2 entities across 2 countries. We have in our search fund, like, investors from all around the world. So there's more, I guess, complex, tax considerations and that sort of thing. But, that's, with a good legal team behind us, we were able to get through all of that. So, it was complex, but it went pretty well, in my opinion.
Okay, great. Can you speak to the purchase price of the business, what you guys bought it for, as well as how the deal was structured? I mean, I would suppose that, and as with any search fund sort of structure, you're going to be putting some debt on the business. How much was debt? How much was equity? Did you put any money into the deal yourself? Let's talk about the structure of the deal and the purchase price.
Yeah, no worries. So we paid, let's call it just under 3.5 times EBITDA. So it depends on, like, earnouts and contingent consideration and the like. But yeah, it's about 3.5 times. The way we structured it was pretty conservative. So roughly 40% with investor equity. So I didn't put, as per the traditional search fund model, I don't put any money down, but it was all traditional, equity from my investors. And we had about 35-40% of traditional bank debt. So we had straight line cash flow lending from a Big Four bank in Australia, and then the remainder was split between both a vendor note as well as an earnout. The earnout was a 1-year earnout tied to gross profit, and then the vendor note was a 2-year vendor note. So there was a not a big, I guess, contingent consideration piece, but it was sizable enough that was material. And from a leverage perspective, it was not too aggressive.
Okay, amazing. And then you went through the whole due diligence process and found yourself in the driver's seat of this new business that you had relatively little or probably not any experience in running this type of business at all before. How was day 1, week 1, month 1 sitting in the driver's seat?
Look, day 1 and month 1 were it kind of ups and downs, right? So, sometimes it's, absolutely nerve-wracking. You're all of a sudden in charge of this business, and, people start to come to you to make important decisions, or what seemed like important decisions at the time. And you're eager to make a positive impression and to start developing trust with the team, particularly. But at the same time, a lot of it is overhyped a little bit. Quite often it's quite administrative. You're making sure you have all the right account logins and bank details, and sometimes, particularly with the fund, there's a lot of administrative stuff that you have to handle on sort of the back office side. So it's a bit of ups and downs, and slowly across that first couple of months, you try and, I guess, ease in to start to make your mark and start to contribute to the business on a daily basis, and understand, I guess, what the business does and what each individual does within that business, and understand the processes from start to finish, and start to make your mark and start to make little changes and little improvement points and that sort of thing. So that's the first couple of months. I think the first year is a big learning curve, particularly for someone who hasn't operated in, like for me, a manufacturing business in electrical engineering. And I base myself out of our Christchurch site, so in New Zealand, where I'm not from. So it was easing in myself into those experiences, and you start to see a lot of things, right? You're dealing with angry customers, dealing with employee issues, machine breakdowns, all of the difficulties, I guess, of running a small business start to come running fast at you after year one. Eventually you sort of get into the groove, and quite quickly you'll find out that, particularly where you can start to actually add some value to the business, that then you kind of join to the hip to the business pretty quickly. So I think after 8-9 months, you're well into it.
Okay, cool. How did you go about making your mark? What new initiatives did you introduce into the business? What changes did you make?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I think probably had the biggest impact is a big focus, I guess, on the HR side, so on the people front, and a big focus on putting the right people in the right seats, and showing that you care about staff career development, and really understanding, I guess, the goals and aspirations of every individual. So we came off quite a low base, I guess, in terms of like I said, the vendor at any one time owned 6 or 7 different businesses, kind of wasn't involved intimately day to day, and effectively the business was I guess you could say a dividend stream for him, right? So there's no real focus in terms of like, how can we make this a great place to work so that we can, empower staff and grow the team and grow the business and all of that stuff. Really focusing in on the people front, I think, shows the people, and that one, you care, which then helps develop a trust, and then hopefully belief that you're leading the business in the right direction, and the business in the right direction, as well as the people in the right direction, and that they're going to have long and fulfilling careers with you. So I think that's probably it's a softer thing, but probably one that I think you feel that impact more than anything else. We did other little things like new software and better financial management processes and systems. We have a VCFO function, which helps with better reporting and understanding numbers and all that sort of stuff. But I think from an impact perspective, I think it's a big focus on people.
Okay, what does that actually look like in practical terms? I mean, if I was sitting in the corner of the factory or the office and watching you those first couple months, and you were making those changes, what were the actual changes that you were making with the people? Is it promotions that you were making, or what does empowering people to grow the business for you look like?
Yeah. So for example, the management team met once a month. So
Okay.
we had now weekly management meetings, and with each person in management, I had one-on-ones weekly as well. In fact, I had one-on-ones with all employees, not weekly, but on a regular basis. And so, initially it started off as, help me understand your role within the business and how I can help you. But then it started developing into something a bit more than that, right? Which is, what are you after in terms of, your career and your development and that sort of thing. Um, and I got feedback from some employees. Like we have a meeting room downstairs where, I got feedback that in my, X years in this business, I've been in this room twice. And in your, first 2 months here, we've been in this room, a whole bunch of times. And just that level of communication, up and down, I think, practically, showed people that, I'm here, well, not just me, but, we're all here to listen, and we're all here on the same page and here together and help each other. So I think, that's one example. We also, have now dedicated HR personnel. We introduced Employment Heroes HR management software. So it's a whole raft of things. But like I said, it's the softer thing. It's actually being on the ground, listening and talking to people and communicating day to day that made the most impact.
And what were some of the moments that came about where you thought, okay, this is actually working and making some of the difference now? Are people coming to you with new ideas for when it comes to growth, operational ideas? What did the outcome of this softer stuff look like to actually impact the business, or how did you see it be a lever for positive change?
Yeah, look, I think from the management layer, definitely seeing, I guess the confidence to come up with new ideas, and the confidence to recommend changes, and the confidence to, make decisions that they may not have made in the past. Everything from, product direction through to how they want to build their own teams, who they want to hire, whereas, at the point of acquisition, they were quite, I guess, deferent, I guess, to whoever the CEO was at the time. And even just recently, having someone recommend for someone else to come join our team to work with us is a good example of, okay, we've actually built a positive workplace where you're going to recommend a friend to come work with us. So it's that, but I think it's also just you see it on a day-to-day basis that people start to enjoy coming into work. There's a bit more laughter, a bit more banter in the workplace, and that sort of thing. And yes, you do hear some direct feedback saying, "Hey, I'm feeling like happy now at work." But again, just observing on a daily basis, like the positive change. That's super rewarding.
Okay, awesome. What does your day-to-day look like now, and how has that changed over the last 18 months, 2 years since you bought the business?
Yeah, so I think year 1.5 was a lot of being in the weeds. So making sure the business is operating efficiently on a day-to-day basis. So understanding, what orders have come in, what's in the production line, what needs to go out. Do we have enough materials? Do we need more resources? Who's working what hours? It's at that level. However, in the last 6 months, particularly as we've built out our team and the middle management layer, especially, that's becoming, I guess, less and less, which enables me to focus more on particularly growth initiatives. So, which new industry segments should we target? Is there a customer that needs more of my attention to focus on, or are there inorganic growth opportunities in terms of like buying another business to bolt onto our group, so kind of those big strategic growth levers that I can now not spend all my time on, but spend more time than I did at the past. And so my days are, whereas previously it was probably like 95% split, whereas now it's probably more of a 60-40 or a 50-50 kind of split. Hopefully we can start to pull on those growth levers a bit more in the next couple of years.
Awesome. And you moved from Australia to New Zealand for this, and you have a young family that you're raising. I don't know if you had kids before you moved, or only now since the move, but tell me about the whole experience moving your family, and how's it been sort of raising a family in a new country, running a new business that you haven't run before?
Yeah, look, it's challenging. The move, search in general when you have a spouse and or kids is a challenging thing to have to do, because you need their full support. Your not just joining a company or getting another job. Like this is a life changing decision, and oftentimes it's requires a lot of commitment financially, time wise, and even now moving away from family and friends, right? So a lot of it was unknown to us, of what this was going to look like, and when we moved, we were like, do we go? Do we come back after 6 months? Do we come back after a year? Do we stay there forever? So yeah, look, it's challenging, and for me, what's helped is actually just having really open and deep communication with spouse and kids, and really take them along the journey. Because then, you sort of live and breathe this adventure together. So, my kids spend a lot of time in the factory. My wife turns up to, all the social events all the work social events, so everyone's kind of met my entire family and that sort of thing. So, yeah, we see it as a challenge, but also an adventure. And yeah, look, after a couple of years, we're pretty well settled now. So it's all good now.
Awesome. And you had time in and amongst all of this to build new connections, make new friends, and do all of that sort of new life stuff after the move? Or was it just head down, let's focus on the business and kind of shack up for a little while we focus on that?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that, but particularly now, like there's quite even like the local ETA community. I think you've had both Elisha, who's a Christchurch boy as well, and Matt, who's not from Christchurch, but New Zealand as well. So like there's a little bit of a community of ETA type people here as well, that we catch up socially and that sort of thing outside of work. So yeah, it's I wish I had more time to do more social stuff, but there's enough.
Yeah, cool. No, it's really strange for some reason. If I include you, even though you're kind of like a grey case, I think 4 out of the first 6 episodes have been with New Zealanders. I don't know how that happened, but it seems like there are a lot of guys sort of running
Yeah.
after the stuff over there, which is cool. Yeah. Okay, great. And then going back to the business now and its growth, has the revenue and profitability of the business grown over the last 18, 24 months that you've been running it? And if not, what are your plans for the future? How do you see this business continuing to grow over time?
Yeah, it has grown. Like I said, we operate in an industry with pretty strong tailwinds that don't seem to be stopping. As a manufacturing business, there are natural limits to the growth, right, in terms of production capacity, factory space, equipment, people, and that sort of thing. So for us, the big challenge looking ahead the next 2 years isn't necessarily more demand for our products, or building a sales engine or go-to-market motion or hiring salespeople. For us, it's all about production capacity. How do we I guess, make the most of this generational opportunity that we're seeing in terms of like strong demand for electrification. And so, yeah, I think for us, it's a lot of it is, more space, better equipment, new product lines, and how do we best service our existing customer base, which is all the key network providers across both countries, to the best of our ability. And, we have a pretty strong vision, I guess, in terms of wanting to be the electrical engineering technical authority in this region. So a lot of that's building that technical bench strength. When when we first bought the business, we had maybe two qualified engineers. Where we have almost 6, 7 now. So yeah, that's an area that we'll be investing a lot going forward as well. And yeah, look, this is an industry where there are similar businesses like us, which are, I guess, old school traditional manufacturers that perhaps have retiring owners and that sort of thing. So inorganic growth and figuring out what other adjacencies we want to play in as well probably plays
Yeah.
a big part of our growth.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's really interesting. The conversation I had with Pete sort of reflected this as well. But with these more traditional businesses, what I've found just from having these conversations is, and you made mention specifically that it hasn't been about necessarily building a big sales engine. It sounds like with the traditional businesses, it's more so let's address the operational inefficiencies. Let's get everything running smoother so that we can better serve the customers. let's just get out of the way of any potential inefficiencies and more so let the business grow. Has your experience been sort of in line with that? Because I mean, you sort of hit the nail on the head as well, saying it hasn't been about building a big sales engine, but we're growing. It's very counter to what a lot of, I guess, business gurus and stuff say online, that you have to work on your marketing and your sales and go and chase more business and whatnot. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I guess our customers are the major utilities across Australia and New Zealand, of which there aren't that many, you know.
Mm,
So, you know, as long as you're wanting to plug in a data center or a substation or whatever into New South Wales, most likely you're going to be doing it in Endeavour Energy's network or Central Energy's network, or, you know, Horizon Power or Western Power in Western Australia. And, you know, if we are the preferred supplier of instrument transformer to that network, you're going to have to buy our product. So, you know, from a sales growth perspective, like, yes, we obviously want to nurture these relationships and make sure that we're at the forefront of these networks and their specifications and what they have in mind in the future. But in the meantime, you know, because of the general rise in electrification, a lot of people are just plugging into the grid. So within their networks, they're already experiencing so much growth for our existing products. So for us, it's like I said, more of a supply problem than a demand problem, which is not necessarily easier. It sounds good, but yeah, it's tricky as well.
okay.
So yeah, at least for us, that's how it's worked out.
Okay. So then what would subsequent acquisitions look like in order to grow? Would that be more so vertical integration, buying up and down the supply chain? I mean, you said you do end-to-end manufacturing, or are you buying competitors, buying adjacent products? What are you looking at in terms of subsequent acquisitions in order to grow?
Yeah, so I think for us, anything that services that same customer set within the same, I guess, voltage ranges in particular. So, you know, if you're building up a substation, again, example, a substation, electrical substation, you know, connecting at the distribution level into Essential Energy's network, you're going to need to buy instrument transformers, but you're also going to need to buy other products. You know, whether that's for lining protection or other types of transformers or circuit breakers or, you know, reclosers or whatever it is, other electrical equipment in that substation specification for Essential Energy. So, you know, that's one angle. You know, a lot of our products also has a long-term service and calibration and testing angle. So, you know, we could get into testing and commission, you know, whether it's leveraging our labs or whether that's in the field. So building up, I guess, a more service arm could be something that we could explore as well. So, you know, we're not wedding ourselves, I guess, just to manufacturing per se, and not necessarily just to our, you know, small subcategory, I guess, of electrical equipment. And yeah, pretty open to, you know, how those puzzle pieces fit in the future.
What does a subsequent acquisition look like in the context of the search fund model? Do you go back to your investors and do almost like a capital call and say, hey guys, we're buying another business? Or now that you've got something operating and cash flowing, you try and do it primarily with bank debt? How does it work?
Yeah, best case, you know, like raising equity is expensive, right? So best case, you have cash if you've saved up and generated enough cash over the holding period. You know, secondly, you can raise more debt or refinance to try and get the deal done. And then thirdly, if you have to, yeah, you can raise external equity as well from your investors firstly, and if not, then potentially someone else.
Okay, awesome. And going back now, I mean, you've been through pretty much the whole journey and you're 2 years into the operating side of things. What would you have done differently, and what advice do you have to people that are embarking on this journey themselves?
Um, it's all about the team, and it's all about building that A team, particularly that sits directly beneath you. So, you know, for me, for example, 6 or 7 months ago, almost 8 months actually, we hired a general manager of operations. And yeah, he's just been a massive help in terms of leverage on my time, which has enabled me to, I guess, shift from that 95/5 to 50/50. But also just as a day-to-day sparring partner, right, in terms of future growth and strategy and that sort of thing, and just someone that's like-minded, that you can trust. And particularly for me, where I have a business with 2 locations, if I can't be at the same place at the same time, having someone that I know can lead and has the same aligned, I guess, view of the world that I do, that's been a big help. And so, if you can either buy a business with that few individuals like that in place, that's ideal. But if not, hiring and finding those individuals and getting them in as quickly as possible may be expensive, at least initially in year 1, year 2, but in my opinion, it pays off in spades. So look, it took me a year and a half before we hired this person. In hindsight, I would have done that quicker.
Fantastic. All right, Jason, thank you so much for chatting with me today. For people that want to ask you any follow-up questions or reach out, what's the best way for them to find you?
LinkedIn's great.
Awesome. I'll link that in the show notes below. Thank you so much for coming on, and chat soon.
Thanks, Dimitri. Appreciate it.